Dan in Great Lakes, Illinois. Hey, Dan, what's up?
Hello, Tom. Once again, God bless you for the work that you do.
Thank you.
I think as it relates to John Boehner and what this man is attempting to do now, I think it goes back to the Lee Atwater days. I'd like to first start out by saying also that I'm an African-American male. I'm 50 years of age. I've worked a long time here on this base. I've witnessed a lot of ugly talk over that 32-year period. When I said back to Lee Atwater and the Reagan years, he touched on what was politically correct before the term politically correct was ever coined, at least before I ever heard of it. And he touched on the evolution of the process, the verbiage of the process, how that you couldn't say certain things anymore because of the civil rights movement that had taken place. During that time, there was, I believe, a conspiracy that started happening. And I came of age. I began to start working during those years when the Reagan Revolution took root. It seems to me it's as if they constructed a list of steps with timing and resources to achieve an objective. In other words, they planned it. During this time, while wages were slipping year after year, these conspirators, the politicians, the industries, the corporations, and I think to some extent even clergy, convinced what was and continues to be largely a white public that they could still hold on to or achieve the American dream. And I think in order to pull this off in what was and continues to be an increasingly hostile environment towards the middle class, they had to dust off or refresh, if you will, old ideas about finance as it related to the middle class. So in essence, they had to create new rules. And so they began to extend credit over longer periods of time. And to those who, in a previous economic climate, wouldn't even have qualified for credit. I remember my dad saying, "Hey, son, you don't want to get payments on a car longer than 24 months." And now, if you expand that out, it's all the way up to 4 or 5 years now.
Yep.
And so it seems like what they have, once again, is a conspiracy that's afoot. And so, thus, as they did this, they preserved what appeared to be the American dream. But if you expand that out, according to everything that I've ever read over this now over a 30-year period, Tom, it's the equivalent of a Garmin GPS device depicting how we got directly to where we are.
Yeah.
And by the way, this does not in any way speak to the draconian tax cuts for the wealthy and for the corporations over that same period of time. In essence, I believe what they have done is they have administered what is the equivalent of a date rape drug onto the American public. But there is a large enough part or segment of the country that has awakened, and they're saying that I've been violated. People who thought that they had a firm grasp on the middle class were scared to death in 2008, and so they voted for President Obama. They were scared. If you look back and think about the Bush presidency, it was a disaster. From the first year, you just pick your disaster. From the start to the finish, it was a disaster. And while there is still a part of the population that's in the emergency room, if you will, and is in a semi-conscious state, they still believe that he being the Republican Party, he's a nice guy, and he wouldn't do that. But the doctor's standing in front of him, and he's got a rape kit in his hand. Yeah. And this is how I see the American public. Tom, if this were a court of law, there would be fingerprints, DNA, video, witness statements, and even a confession.
Yeah.
Your thoughts, please.
I think you're absolutely right. And in fact, we have a clip of Lee Atwater, the Lee Atwater quote that you're talking about that many of our listeners and viewers may not be familiar with. And I'm going to read it first, and then you can hear him in his own words, because it's not the best audio. So by reading it first, you'll understand what he's saying. He says, and this was back when he was working on, as I recall, either the Reagan campaign or the George Herbert Walker Bush campaign. Lee Atwater's the guy who was behind the Willie Horton ads and all this other stuff. He says, you start out back in 1954 by saying, and then he says the N-word 3 times. He says, by 1968, you can't say, and he drops that word again. He said, it hurts you. It backfires. So you say stuff like forced busing, states' rights, and all that stuff. And you're getting abstract now. Now you're talking about cutting taxes, and all these things you're talking about are totally economic things, and a byproduct of them is blacks get hurt worse than whites. So when you say we want to cut this, it's much more abstract than even using the busing thing, and a hell of a lot more abstract than dropping the N-word. And he actually does the N-word. And here's the clip right here.
You start out in 1954 by saying, by 1968 you can't say that hurts your backfire, so you say stuff like forced busing, states' rights, and all that stuff. And you're getting so abstract now, you're talking about cutting taxes, and all of these things you're talking about are totally economic things, and the byproduct of them is blacks get hurt worse than whites. And subconsciously, maybe that is part of it. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that if it is getting that abstract and that coded, that we're doing away with the racial problem one way or the other. You follow me? Because obviously sitting around saying we want to cut taxes, we want to cut this, and we want is much more abstract than even the busing thing. And a hell of a lot more abstract than, you know.
There you go. So, Dan, I think, the evidence, I mean, if you and I were prosecutors in court, all I'd do is put that tape up. What do you think?
Tom, I think you're absolutely right. Being an African American, and I speak to the differences in the two races because we see it, the conversations that I have with people who are African Americans, we've seen this as it is. Yeah. And it is nothing less than what it is. Yeah. There's a cuisine in the African American community. It's called chitlins. And I always say we've been eating chitlins a long time. Chitlins are the intestinal tract of a scavenger, of the pig. Right. But it was the slop that we had to eat as slaves. And I say that to say you can't convince us of the garbage that comes out of your mouth because you mistreated us for too long. Right. It's not until, in my view, white people largely in this country wake up to the fact that they do not have your interest in mind. They use smoke and mirrors to deceive the very people who've elected them. The smoke being the debate that can be the fog of the political process, and the mirrors are the commonalities, the optics, the visuals. See, I look like you. Right.
So net, are you? Did you call in this context to agree with me in my assertion, which I'm saying I know I'm going to get pilloried on the right for saying this, and even a lot of white liberals are going to say, what's he talking about? That when John Boehner writes a memo to all the members of Congress condemning the president for, quote, boasting about his willingness to do it and daring the American people to stop him, and then goes on to say, when he goes and speaks before largely white crowds around America, he says, I'm asked, when will the House stand up on behalf of the people to stop President Obama? We elected a president, America notes. We did not elect a monarch or a king. That in essence what he's saying, that this is just the next step. This is step 4 in Lee Atwater's thing. First you're using the N-word, then you're talking about busing, then you're talking about tax cuts and cutting social services and food stamps, and now you're talking about executive power. It's all the same thing. It's all saying he's an uppity black man.
That is absolutely right, Tom. These people, I think it's a conspiracy started by the Reagan administration. That's where it all started in earnest. But I think now what's happened is, in addition to what it is you're saying, you are absolutely right. But what's happening now is the Bush administration was a disaster. And so they have no place else to go. You cannot run on that man's record. So they just ignore Bush as much as they can. Yep. But they're hoping that they can continue to speak like what you're talking about until a disaster hits. And then they can say, see, we've been telling you this all the time.
Right. You never should have put that black guy in the White House. Look at what happened. And they're bringing it about. This is what the caucus room conspiracy in 2009 was all about. Newt Gingrich came on this program and bragged about it. Pete Sessions said we're going to become like the Taliban insurgency. Kevin McCarthy, who has now been elevated to House Majority Whip, said he was part of that conspiracy. He said afterwards that we are going to fight this president. We are going to fight him, he said, on every single piece of legislation. This man will have no legacy whatsoever. Now, McCarthy didn't say that, but I'm adding that as the essence of it. Dan, brilliant, insightful, and Shano wants you to be our caller of the day and get a free book, your choice of about a half a dozen of the books that I've written. Is that all right with you?
Yes, sir.
Okay, hang on just